not. I'm saying this now so I don't worry to go through as listed when I know it's not going to be before us. So essentially what we'll do today is to continue and conclude with public defender and whatever discussion that comes from that. And that would basically be the matters for today. With that said, I'm going to go to item 3. Any apology is from Minister Green. And can I ask her to? Can you invite? Hmm? Oh, okay. Please go ahead and invite the presenters. Mrs. Harrison Henry, I welcome you and your team. You had a lot of company the last time, now you're alone. So don't feel too lonely. I have other members of the committee who will give you full company. Um, while I'm doing the welcome, I want to recognize the committee being fortunate to have sharing with us 15 students from Karamak who is sitting in on the proceedings. And these are our media personnel of the future, and I know member Anna would concur, being a graduate of that institution. Soon after, you will not, look, first of all, let me say welcome to you students all. Hope that you find the sitting interesting and things you can take away after. And I know in a short while you won't be sitting over there, but you'll be sitting over here in the press box or you might be sitting in here. So do enjoy this afternoon sitting. Members, I'm sitting on the right side now. Members, you'll recall at the last sitting we had 3 sets of presentation. The Public Defender's Office led, but we basically, frankly, aborted the presentation because we had 2 other groups from Western Jamaica. The St. James Ministers Fraternal and the St. James Lay Magistrate Association, along with the St. Catherine Lay Magistrates Association presented, but more so for the presenters from St. James who would be traveling far. So we aborted the public defender's presentation, and they were kind enough to agree to return to complete that presentation, for which we are here this afternoon. So having said that, Mrs. Harrison Henry, I now turn over to you to complete the presentation, and then we will have what discussions emanating from it. The last time what we did in terms of procedure was to take any clarification as we went along, and then we go in any full discussions on any of the items raised. So, once again, welcome, and I turn the floor over to you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, by way of introduction, Mr. Victor Hemmings is to my right, our Special Projects Manager. Mrs. Susanne Davis to my immediate left, and to her left, David Clark, who manages our office in Montego Bay, and who is an investigator. Behind us is Mr. Keneal Cole, an investigator. Mr. Chairman, on the last occasion that we were here, one of the learned members asked and sought clarification about the sum provided by government for the provision of food to detainees. So if that's acceptable, I'd like to start there and refer this committee to JCF Force Order serial number 3544, subject number 5, and that is to be found at page 3 of that Force Order, where it is confirmed that the rate to be paid for contractors, and I'm reading from it, for the supply of prisoners that has been increased to $300, up from $200, with effect from April 1, 2015. This is broken down as follows. 1, breakfast, $80. 2, lunch, $130. 3, supper, $90. And of course, there is an explanation, that the rates are not retroactive, but actually start on the 1st day of April. So I think, Chairman, if it may well be that this has clarified Mr. Witter's questions in respect of the money for the provision of 3 meals per day for an adult male or female as a detainee. My friend, Mr. Green, who is not here, had asked specifically about the number of complaints that we had. And I just wanted to provide that, Chairman. Arising from Montego Bay, we have 553. From St. Catherine North, 86. From Kingston Western, 40. Making a total of 479. We have not yet been furnished with the statistical data from St. Catherine North and Kingston Western to be able to provide any detailed analysis on the states of emergency in those jurisdictions in respect of numbers, ages, length of detention, as we have done in relation to St. James. So, Chairman, what I'm proposing to spend some time on today, and hopefully not too long, is to direct our minds to the impact that the states of emergency have had on our office as public defender in relation to this, and they are contained in the submissions. I would say starting at paragraph 129, page 45. So there has been an increase in number of complaints received, and these complaints have come from detainees, from family members. And our responsibilities have heightened, and we have to ensure a constant vigilance and presence at the detention facilities. And frankly, we have been stretched, and the states of public emergency seem to have put us in a situation where some elements of the JCF appear to believe that we're antagonistic towards them. Our experience has been that with each extension, there is a greater sense that the public defender and her team are interfering with the work of the JCF, and we are impeding the work of the JCF. Chairman, we're very clear in our minds that we support all legitimate law enforcement activities. The situation came to a head if you look at paragraph 131 on October the 5th, when myself, Mrs. Davis, and Mr. Cole went on one of our usual visits to the Tambrin Farm facility that houses detainees. And I don't want to read all of that which is contained in the paragraph, but it represents an attitude within that we have encountered in the JCF. I think, Chairman, everybody has read the paragraph. We have noticed also that up to last week Friday, a team from the Office of the Public Defender was told that they could not enter the cells. This was out at Four Paths, where 4 women were held. They were released yesterday, and family members had complained to us, and we sought to investigate the circumstances under which they were being held, why they were being held, and everything else. And the team was told on Friday that they could not enter the cells because there is nothing under the regulations that permit the public defender and a team to enter, and that the only way we could come inside of the cell was if we took a justice of the peace with us. In the interest of our investigations, a JP accompanied us, and the ladies were released yesterday after being in custody for 26 days. So we do have concerns that there is a sense that we are impeding and interfering with police work. We have no, and that could not be, that is so far from the truth that, but it's important enough for us to bring it to the attention of the committee. We have asked Commissioner of Police for the data in relation to numbers of persons who have come into custody in St. Catherine North and Kingston Western, and we have been told that we will get them in due course. Until that time, I cannot give any detailed analysis of what happens in those jurisdictions, except the kind of cursory information that is contained within the submissions. So I wanted, Chairman, to...
Before you go on, Ms. David, that incident that you reported on, which is covered in 131, did you bring it to the attention of the police high command?
No, we have not done that. This was an incident that took place in the face of other police officers. And indeed, and in fact, when we were here last week, it turned out that a visiting justice was also in the cell, witnessed, saw, and heard that which was told to me and our team. You see, Chairman, as a detainee, you still have rights. And in spite of the existence of states of emergency, you are still entitled to the protection of law, because the rule of law has not been removed from our democracy. And it's something we feel strongly about. I merely inquired of the officer who I didn't know before, but I identified him as the most senior officer, who was interrogating a detainee who was obviously shackled and had his hands on the concrete table like this. And I merely asked whether or not this detainee had been advised of his rights, and his right to have an attorney present, his rights generally, and his right to have an attorney present before answering questions. And those basic rights are not removed by the state of emergency. And this was the outcome. We have the matter under consideration, and we will make a decision about that, Chairman.
I asked you that question, Ms. Henry, because the office that you represent is a commission of the Parliament, same Parliament that approves the state of emergency.
Yes.
You are, well, having said that, it can't get any higher than that, being a commission of an office of this Parliament. I would suggest that this matter be brought to the attention of the Commissioner.
Very well, Chairman.
Just a follow in relation to that issue. As public defender, you would have been involved in these type of interventions outside of the state of emergency. Can you say if that experience that you have or you would have had during your visit to areas that are confined to the state of emergency, is it unprecedented, or you would have had that experience in your day-to-day encounter seeking to address some of these issues on a normal basis?
The response of the officer on the date in question was extreme at the very highest. Happily, it is not something that we experience routinely, but I've brought to this committee's attention the added requirements. Oh, you can't come into the lockup facility without a JP. In fact, Mr. Canil Cole was excluded from entering, whilst Mrs. Davis was allowed to go in with the JP, who is also a member of our staff. Now, we could not see any justification for excluding a male investigator who was going in to investigate a matter with two ladies who were accompanying him. So, Chairman, we raise it because with each extension, we have noticed an emboldenment in attitude towards us. And as far as we are concerned, and the record will show that when we go to the lockups, we go strictly by the rules, because there are standard rules in visiting a lockup, which all of us know and are trained in. If I may, Chairman, um, uh, we have made some recommendations, and I really want, if you don't mind, to address them, not necessarily in the order in which they are prepared. Regulation 30, again, is something that we have concern about. As I said on the last occasion, this is something that we have discussed with Commissioner of Police, and we have also written to the Commissioner about, in that the taking of persons in custody has to be based upon the terms of the regulations. Because, Chairman, as we all know, without a state of emergency, a police officer can arrest anyone without a warrant. Under the state of emergency, what the difference is that there is a period where an individual can be detained up to 30 days before being taken to the parish court or before a decision is taken. And as we have said over and over, it's the absence of judicial authority over persons in the state of emergency that is of the gravest concern. And also that persons are being picked up without those persons having displayed behavior which is of such a nature as to give reasonable grounds for suspecting that that person has acted in a manner prejudicial to public safety or has committed or is committing an offense. So I think the point is a simple one, that even under a state of emergency, there has to be a threshold that the security forces must see or have information in respect of. So one of the things that we found, not only in St. James, but also in St. Catherine North, many children of detainees are left unattended, or some relative or neighbors in some instances have had to take charge of children. And we're of the view that the Community and Safety Department should do a follow-through to make sure that children and the elderly for whom the detained is responsible are not left unattended. We have had many cases, Chairman, referring to paragraph 133, where a detainee has a prior appointment, and we are suggesting that an intervention team seek to make contact with the entity to verify same and seek to expedite the processing of the detainee. We believe that the very basis of the detentions are outside of Regulation 30. There is great need. This, of course, Chairman, if the Parliament votes to extend the state of emergency, that the detainees need to make contact with their families before their telephones are confiscated, and that there should be liaison officers to provide information from the JCF to family members. We do not accept that there is adequate information flowing from the lockups where detainees are to outside where relatives, parents, wives, spouses, baby mothers. Well, I think we have said what?
Before you go from that one, which is 136.
Yes.
is what you're proposing here intended to augment what is there, if any? And then my other question, what prevails now when someone is picked up?
Chairman, the fact is that there is no structured system of providing information to family members. So, for instance, one of the things that we do when we are particularly in St. James, and as we enter on the compound, we get the list of persons over whom concern is expressed. And people are normally under a shed when they are permitted to remain under the shed, Chairman. And we go in and we try to get information for the family members as to why it is their family was detained. There is no structure in place for that flow of information between what is happening in the lockups to the detainee and someone outside who needs to know what is happening to my son, my baby father, or otherwise. So there is some small flow of information, but we do a lot of that when we are there. And there needs, if the state of emergency is going to be extended, there needs to be a structure whereby family members can be apprised as to their loved ones in detention. We ask that there be a complete stoppage of the violation of Regulation 30. So, put another way, it appears to us that where there is law provided by this very Parliament as to how the police is to operate, then the police needs to fall in line and carry out the provisions of the law. That way, Chairman, net fishing would be tremendously reduced. And you know, Chairman, if you look at paragraph 139, it says it all, and it's something that we have been saying over and over. So we can't turn regulation on top of its head and then say, we take you in custody, and then we fingerprint you and run you through our database and other information to see if you are wanted, which is really what is happening. So, Chairman, our opinion at this time, preliminary as it is that most of the persons who have been taken into custody have been unlawfully taken into custody. And I use this opportunity, if any one of them wishes for us to make an assessment of their individual cases or individual case, we are open to offer that help.
Ms. Member Anna, you want to get a clarification?
Mr. Chairman, I'm listening to the public defender, and I've read through her report. I would ask that this committee possibly agrees in light of the charges, because I would like to hear from the police again, based on the charges that are put forward. But also, if this committee would agree to hear from some of the families of former detainees, to hear what their experience is, and even perhaps if a former detainee or former detainees could come and address this committee, I think it would be very helpful to that report coming out. Because a number of us, in looking at voting in that extension, every time that extension comes to Parliament, it comes with a number of loaded arguments. And I think sometimes the human aspect of what is taking place does not hit so home to some of the persons sitting in Parliament. And I think it could be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we could hear firsthand some of these instances.
My own thoughts is that it can only serve to give greater depth and authenticity to the report that we will submit to the full House. Our duty as a committee is to dig deep into the matters to better inform the members of the full House and the subsequent debate that takes place. So I would definitely enjoin that recommendation, and particularly in respect of the commissioner. We had only gotten the report from the commissioner and the JDF, which has been tabled, but we never had a chance to look at that against the reports coming from a commission of this Parliament. And I think that the better order to do it is to have the family members first, and then having the commissioner. So anything that comes up, we'll have the benefit of getting the response from the police. So we agree. Let me, Member Whittle.
I understand what Member Anna is trying to say, but I believe, though, that given the fact that we have the public defender, which is a commission of Parliament, and she would have given us that report on behalf of the public and those persons who are detained. I see no reason, really, why we should not accept her experience and opinion as it relates to her recommendation and take it from there. I think, it is quite reasonable that we accept the opinion and experience of the public defender and not really go beyond that in terms of bringing anybody else here. It would appear as if we might be questioning her.
I recognize Mr. Whitta's significant experience on matters dealing with local interventions. However, I think we have a duty as representatives of people to hear from the people. What I'm getting from the public defender as well is that her team cannot even get in to speak to some of the persons inside. That's one, in great detail. And what I've picked up from the report is that from the persons who have made the complaints, where she has been able to go in and her team has been able to go in, but based on the report, there's a number, there are scores of other people who are there. And the families perhaps don't have an outlet to express themselves. And if this Parliament cannot hear from people who we represent, then I'm not sure why we have a job. These are the commissions where the public should be able to come and speak to us. So if the public defender doesn't have a problem with it, and I don't think she would think that we are believing that her report is not credible, but I think it would bring depth to what she has been saying all along.
Before I'll invite member, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I do understand both of my colleagues' sentiments that they are expressing. My thing on weighing on the matter is that the reason that we, as parliamentarians or legislators, sought to have what you would say an independent body such as the public defender and her team, and any other, for that matter, is for the simple reason that the chambers or the chamber of parliament is very small and highly unable to accommodate the entire public. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, it is on that, I put that in it because I wanted a laugh out of it. It is on that ground that we ask them to make representation. They will go out, get the necessary information, and bring back to us. Thus, we would want to just accept as best as possible what the public defender is saying.
I hear you, Mr. Clark. But just on my own, I intimated my support to Member Anna's suggestion, and let me hasten to say, not for one passing second, I question or doubt the report from the public defender. I gave my support to the recommendation because it would give us, the committee, the opportunity to get a first-hand feedback from some of those persons who have had experiences and has missed unpleasant experiences, or any experiences, even pleasant ones. And as Ms. Anna said, it is the duty of the Parliament to hear from the people who we represent. And lastly, it is part of our modus operandi as committees to invite persons from the public. And if for some reason all of St. James would turn up, or all 3,500 plus persons who were detained should show up here, as Mr. Clark is fearful of, we could schedule them and listen to them in batches, and we will be duty bound to listen to them as leaders in their parliament. Oh my! Well, yes.
Chairman. I see the line that is being pursued. If we are saying that is, we have delegated some of our functions, and in this case to a commission of parliament, which has carried out its investigation. And I just really want to determine what mischief we're really trying to remedy. Having the commission having carried out its work, and it has made findings, and we're accepting those findings as being truthful. Do we need to go behind those findings? I'm not sure that it would serve the purpose which we say, because it's gone out there, and I'd want to find out if the public defender, some of the issues to deal with the police, if those are systemic weaknesses or just an instance, right? Well, I don't think the commission, the public defender, has been in these situations, and I just like to find out from her if she has made a determination as to whether it's a systemic weakness or it's just a one-off case of having gone into the.
Well, I just so direct the public defender to respond. Public defender, I'm turning over to you, whether it's systemic or anecdotal.
The incident in St. Catherine North, I will put that down as an isolated act of extremism. That's how I will describe that. The attitude, however, that causes that conduct is systemic. The attitude, the foundation that causes that extreme conduct is very systemic in the force, because there is a sense of ownership of detention centers. There is a sense that people who come in to look about constitutional rights, the secure rights, are somehow interfering with their work, impeding their work, and so on. In addition to which, what is also systemic is a failure to interpret the law in a balanced way, wherein their rights as security officers, they do their duty, but in keeping with the law. And that is something that we have suffered from as a country long before I became public defender.
So in those circumstances, you have made specific recommendations as to how to overcome those difficulties?
I can only say that the police ought to police within the law. This is very cultural and historically rooted in the JCF. And look, this is not starting yesterday. This has been historically so.
And you've had similar complaints from lawyers who attend on these institutions to represent clients who are
we liaise with lawyers who go to these detention centers. They have not complained to us in that regard. They have not made any complaint to us about that. But we have faced it. And each time there is an extension by this Parliament, we sense a tightening up on the level of cooperation that comes from the JCF to the Office of the Public Defender. And that's our reality.
I crave your indulgence a little bit, because one of the things that bothers me is that somehow Member Campbell feels that I'm being mischievous, whether explicitly or implicitly. No, those were the words that came out of his mouth. But $300 a day for a grown man or for a grown woman. A small tin of mackerel is what, 120 between $120 and $150. A pound of rice. You don't know them things. So if you're really trying to give 3 square meals at $80, $120, and then $90, it's almost inhumane to consider that you're trying to do something like this. $80, unless you're mixing up flour and butter or margarine and putting some gravy on it, you're really, with an egg. I'm not sure what these young men or young women are being fed. And there's some who might say, well, you know, them do something, serve them right, they're in there. But there's a human face to an underbelly in this country. And there's a human face to a segment of our population that somehow feels that those in leadership don't listen, hear, or even attend to them in any meaningful way. I am not one of those people, and I certainly don't want to be. And whether or not the public defender believes in my intervention that I'm undermining her report, or I feel that her report is not sound, I want to clear that up. That's not what I'm saying. And I would hope that that is not what is being conveyed. I simply want to know from families what kind of toxicity, post-traumatic stress, conditions that are being experienced in there. Because as a former minister, I saw some things with young people in remand centers that we had to go in and deal with. Now, if you're putting truckloads of people in small, cramped spaces for extended periods of time, on a sustained basis, and perhaps not feeding them correctly, perhaps maybe they're not accustomed to it. I think the Parliament has a duty to hear firsthand from some of these people, because we keep extending this situation in their lives. First person to what? We keep extending it, Madam Public Defender. And Mr. Chairman, I want it to go in the records that I would like to hear from the families and certainly the police, since the charges have been leveled, and perhaps even from former detainees, to see if we need to make these recommendations or accept the recommendations, and to see how we can improve the system under the state of emergencies, even if we're going to extend it. It can't be that it has to continue this way.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Minister Terlong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. I read through the minutes of the last meeting, and I listened to the public defender. She spoke. And certainly there is a cultural aspect to how persons in detention are usually viewed by persons in the public, and perhaps also in terms of the lack of first world facilities to ensure that there is a sort of there's a sort of pleasant stay, so to speak, whilst persons are being kept at Her Majesty's pleasure. But as it relates to the state of emergencies, I think first and foremost we must as a nation accept that the state of emergency, the zones of special operations, that they have contributed to a reduction of crime, violent crimes in Jamaica. And I think that must be a starting point. We have seen a 21% reduction in violent crimes. We have heard from business persons in the Montego Bay area and other areas in St. Catherine. I should say the wider St. James area.
So advise Minister Terlong. Last sitting, I don't think you were here, but that information was laid and acknowledged in the last. The members are apprised of.
Yes, I'm aware. I was I kept in touch via WhatsApp during my absence whilst I was away on government business. Thank you. So I think it's important, nonetheless. It can never be overstated, that there is a sense of public order. There is a sense of safety throughout the greater St. James area and throughout the greater St. Catherine area. And I think as a nation, we ought to applaud ourselves as a parliament for having extended the state of emergencies, and as a nation for having seen to it that there is this level of peace and a great reduction of some 21% in violent crime. Certainly, we've not had this reduction within the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years as relates to a reduction in violent crimes. So we have to look at that. As it relates to the concerns raised by the public defender, I think that when you look at the length of time.
There's a point of order. You said,
sorry,
Member Bunting.
No, the member is really misleading the committee. Mr. Chairman, notwithstanding the reduction relative to last year, which was certainly the worst year by far since the 2010 Tivoli operation, notwithstanding 3 states of emergency and 2 ZOSOs, this year we will have more murders than 2015, 2014, 2013, or 2012. So we have had a reduction, like for 30 years.
Mr. Chairman,
that's just
Mr.
misinformation,
Chairman,
right? It's just wrong. Last year was an extraordinarily high year. last
I'm
year.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, what exactly is the point of order? Does the point of order relate to the percentage,
No,
the
you
21%?
you said we,
Does the point of order, I'm sorry,
reduction
member,
was
just a
the lowest
clarification.
I can't take 2
we've had
points
in
of
30
Yeah, I'm not
years.
getting the
No,
point of order
Mr.
though.
Terry Long, I cannot take
And
2
this is
points
how
of
we
order at
descend
the
into
same
the
time.
tribe. This is exactly how we descend into tribal politics. All I'm asking is,
No,
what is the
let me,
point of
I
order?
will come to you, but we will do it in some order.
But I just want to know what the point of
No,
order
you'll
is.
wait until I allow you to speak.
All right, let's see what the point of order is if he
Okay.
gets there.
Member Bunting, are you true?
Point of order was that he's misleading the committee. If
Okay.
you look at the statistics published by the JCF, with a month and a week to go in November, a month and a week to go in the year, we have already exceeded or almost exceeded every year during the last term of the previous administration.
Okay.
I still have not heard the point of order.
No, you can, okay, that is
I've
your point of order.
indicated the 21% drop within 1 year is one of the greatest percentage drops we've had in violent crimes for many years. That's what I've said. That's what I've said. So I have not heard from the member who has raised the point of order that outside of that there was a period in time when the drop was 25% or 30% or some greater percentage other than the 21 years. So a point of order did not arise. It was again what we do not want this committee to descend into the sort of political gimmickry that has plagued committees and continues to plague our society, because there was no point of order. In any event, I continue. I continue. As it relates to the length of time that persons are being detained, reading the report, I've seen where on average the public defender has indicated on average there is some 2 days to 7 days, sometimes more. And I think certainly that is something that ought to be addressed. If it is that we should look at, when we go back to the regulations, when we look at the rules for the detention period, I mean, it goes back to how quickly persons can be processed. And that is where I think instead of becoming let's say a commission of inquiry, where you sit and you spend days as a sort of fact-finding mission and you listen to hundreds of persons or numerous persons in a fact-finding sort of commission of inquiry period template. I think we have the report from the public defender. The report seems credible. And so certainly, as it relates to the length of time, we can make recommendations to the JCF to ensure that whether persons must be processed, whether within 24 hours or 48 hours, but certainly after 72 hours, persons should be processed within a 72-hour period. I must also state that looking at the report, I noticed that the length of time that it took for a person to be processed is often dependent on whether or not they actually have IDs. Again, this goes back to a part of the problem that we've been seeing as a nation. There is the need for a national identification system where every single Jamaican from birth, they have this identification. It would make life so much simpler for all Jamaicans. So, for example, Mr. Chairman, within the context of a state of emergency or a ZOZO, then if once the police stops you, you have your identification. The police can run your identification number. The police can see that, okay.
But I ask you to just stick to the report.
Yes, but the report speaks of the lack of identification and the length of time and the fact that persons took longer to be processed because they did not have identifications or visual identifications. So this is a systemic problem again in Jamaica, and as a country we need to move towards a culture where identification becomes the norm, where every single Jamaican from the time they are born, they have their birth certificates and they have a national ID that tells you who they are. It is very, very important, because in much of these cases, if these persons had their IDs and could be readily identified, then that would have certainly made the processing feature within the report less as well.
Okay, Ms. Harrison.
Chairman, we are here only in relation to this report. We are not here about any other matter. I wanted, however, to say that it is our experience, and we see this, that there are different Montego Bays. You have Montego Bays consisting of communities in which there are heavy detachment and deployment of police and soldiers. The Montego Bays, from which the 19-year-old to 25-year-old, who are the ones who have an equal opportunity to be detained. So you have that Montego Bay, and you have another Montego Bay, where you can literally live your life almost as if there's no state of emergency. And that is the reality of what exists. In terms of identification, I want to make the point that it is being treated by the security forces that if you don't have an ID, it may well be the basis for detention. And at paragraph 31 of the report, we say, according to the police, the processing of detainees without identification took longer than those with identification. Anecdotally, there is evidence to the contrary. The point is that we're not talking about world-class detention centers, you know. What we're talking about are facilities that are fitting and respectful of the inherent dignity of the human being. That's what we're talking about. So we are not interested in world-class facility. We know we don't have them, and we know we don't have them in hospitals, we don't have them in schools. We're talking about what our charter speaks to, which is the inherent dignity of the person. And we believe that persons who come into custody by virtue of a police officer taking them in is a heavy responsibility, burdensome responsibility to ensure that these persons are treated properly. These are not persons who have committed an offense, and in the vast majority of cases, these are persons who have been picked up on the way to shop, on the way to in fact, one particular young man who was a mental health patient, he was in the churchyard where he works, and he was taken from out of the churchyard and put on a truck. That is a police or soldier truck. So the point we make is that it is not so much saying to the police, we should reduce the time of processing. We are saying that to the extent that the Parliament extends a state of emergency, police within the terms of the regulations, which is see behavior that causes the police officer to have reasonable belief that there's a commission of a crime. And in a democracy, that is the basis on which you really have to part ways with your own liberty by virtue of your own conduct. So, Chairman, that's all. I made an error earlier that I want to correct. We were talking about the powers of the police to be able to detain you, to arrest you without a warrant and detain you. We don't need a state of emergency to do that, because they can always arrest you without a warrant. In certain circumstances, you can be detained. The difference, I had said a month, it's really 3 months. So if you do not have the resources to have an attorney to follow up your detention via court proceedings for habeas corpus, you really are in a dark corner. And that is the reality.
If I'm understanding you correct, sorry. Mr. Whittle. Mr. Whittle.
Mr. Chairman,
no,
sir.
Mr. Whittle ahead of you.
Mr. Chairman, sir.
You was? No,
you
sorry, I never. Mr. Whittle will willingly yield to you. Go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier my colleague, Member Bunting, made a statement which I don't think you pay much attention to, but I know very well that the media was capturing most of it, where he mentioned where he mentioned that we will surpass a certain number of murder. I am asking a question, Mr. Chairman. If it is that my colleague is a prophet at this time, or is it that it is an organized?
May I respond, Mr. Chairman?
No, you don't have to. You said it. You said that we will surpass that number.
Yes.
Just out of courtesy, you said
So-
you're asking a question of your colleague. Let me give him a chance to answer the question you're asking.
The number of murders that he said we will surpass.
May I respond, Mr. Chairman? I have in front of me on my laptop the JCF Periodic Serious and Violent Crimes Review from January 1st to November 24th, 2018. Up to November 24th, there were 1,165 murders in Jamaica, at an average of 3.55 murders per day. If we extrapolate at this pace, we will end the year at 1,296 murders. This exceeds the 1,207 in 2015, the 1,005 in 2014, the 1,200 in 2013, and the 1,087 in 2012. So the point I am making is that while we're trumpeting this as a success, this strategy of states of emergency, it is only a success relative to last year, which was, a catastrophe. But relative to any other year since 2010, this is not a good year for murders in terms of the number of murders in Jamaica. That's the point I was making.
Thank you, Mr. Bunting. Just for my own further clarification, Ms. Harris, what I'm understanding you to be saying, or what I'm gleaning from what you're saying, is that with over 4,000 persons detained and just over 4,000 detained by virtue of the period you covered, you have roughly 3,600 persons who, of those for which the police had no basis of charging them, and hence their innocence, at least up to then, would have been established. Notwithstanding that, they would have been subjected to an average of 4.4 days detention in the conditions that you outline in the report, and therefore the danger is that you are potentially recruiting 4,400 persons to be more hostile or aggrieved from being subjected to those situations, though innocent of any charge. That is what I am gleaning. So I just want to make sure that my perspective is informed by what your report is indicating. So I'll let her respond, and then member with her.
Yes. Chairman, we are on the same page, and I ask you to look at the pie chart on page 23, which speaks for itself. And remember, these are statistical data from the JCF itself. And I would urge this committee to assist us in getting the data for St. Catherine North and Kingston Western, that we're able to break it out in this kind of way. But Chairman, you have, in a nutshell, put together what our position is.
Member Whittle.
Yes, I pick up just one concern in relation to the report from the public defender. Repeatedly, I get a sort of a subjective view in respect of the extension. From time to time in her presentation, her remarks really seems to be subjective as it relates to the extension and not an objective view of the state of emergency ever since its inception. She has been saying repeatedly that, it is subject to the extension. And I pick up a little concern there because I would have expected a more objective view as it relates to the overall implementation of the state of emergency and the concerns.
You want to get a response from the
yes.
Madam
Yes.
Public Defender?
I would be happy to answer Mr. Whittle's concern. If you just broke it down for me, I want to make sure I understand what the member's concern is.
Me to break it down?
I'm asking for some assistance in clarifying.
One is that your comments are very subjective and it is without any objective basis, and your comments is not giving any objective support to the extension of the state of emergency. Did I do well, Mr. Whitton?
Let me try and explain. You mentioned from time to time that every time there is an extension of the state of emergency, you seem to pick up this resistance from the police. This resistance from the police in relation to your... But that's the point I'm making. So I want to know if your comment is subjective to the extension, or you are speaking about the entire implementation of the state of emergency and not just stating that every concern that you would have found is that whenever an extension is sought and given, then the police start to act outside of the law. That's the kind of understanding I'm getting.
Member, my position is I certainly remember the Suppression of Crime Act. I have been around from that time, and I have been around from the kind of culture that spawned across the JCF. The fact is that insofar as the statistical data is concerned here, this is provided to us by the JCF and by other agencies of the state. The fact of the matter is that we have experience, and this is not subjective. I'm not the only one in our office who has experienced that with each extension, the JCF is emboldened in curtailing and, treating us in a way to suggest that we are interfering with them. How can a public defender interfere with JCF and JDF person in the performance of their duties? I'm at a loss. I don't know, member, if I've misunderstood your question.
No.
That's why I was seeking clarity.
If I might just add, when you were asked by Member Campbell about the police's attitude towards your intervention, you said that, and he asked that if it is systematic, and you agree that it is systematic within in terms of the attitude of the police. And then when he asks about your experience, and you said that it was just one incident that you would have had that difficulty. Isolated incident. You said that, and that is my reason for raising these questions. Because if that incident is isolated, then that couldn't really express an overall view of concern as it relates to an extension of a state of emergency.
Any further response, Mrs. Public Defender?
Chair, I just want to clarify something. I'm the one who used the word an isolated and extreme incident, and I'm the one who referred to certain systemic situations that exist. I don't think it's any secret in this country as to how some elements of the JCF operate. I don't think it's any secret that when given extra powers that they're often abused. I don't think that, or is it that we live in different Jamaicas? Forgive me, member, I have a difficulty in fully appreciating your question. Our experience, and if we take it from 2010, the state of emergency then, we saw the end result when JCF operates in and JDF operates in an environment where they are given extraordinary powers. But it didn't extend to the loss of lives on this occasion. But the abuse on this occasion relates to liberty.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is a vast and great improvement, the operations now against 2010.
Because nobody has been murdered or killed?
No,
Forgive me, I'm not understanding.
It is a great improvement. You mentioned that so many people were killed then in 2010.
All right.
No, not a single person was killed.
No, I think...
So we must accept that that is a great improvement.
Okay.
Member, could I...
You want to... Member Taylor, let me just allow this to clarification to...
Well, what we would say when we talk about no one has been killed, we would say none that we know of. I find it an assault on the rights of citizens when we can say that because no one has been killed, it has been a vast improvement.
It's fine. Very well. That is not what the member said. And even as an attorney at law, I fail to understand how that interpretation could have been attributed to what the member has said. The comment was raised by the public defender that as it relates to 2010 and the murders committed in 2010, and the members indicated quite clearly that clearly there has been some growth. There has been improvement in how we police, in how we conduct state of emergencies, and that there have been that no citizen has been killed. And I think that's a blanket statement of fact. And if the public defender goes to a 2010 incident 8 years ago, then I believe the member is correct in pointing out quite clearly that there's a great improvement in how we police and how we conduct state of emergency. So I don't think it needs to be shrouded in anything other than that.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may. This is the second time I'm speaking. Other persons have spoken more than once.
No, I thought you were finished.
No. Oh, no, not at all. I was just addressing that clarification. I have heard I was in Montego Bay 3 weeks ago, and I did day life Montego Bay. I did nightlife Montego Bay. And I was at Pier 1. I was at Pier 1 as a part of the nighttime activities. And I can tell you, no, I'll say it because yes, we have to make sure that we in the entertainment world. And from an entertainment perspective, from an entertainment perspective, the patrons, and there were hundreds of patrons at Pier 1, and they all enjoyed themselves. They all spoke about the freedom with which they could move in Montego Bay. They spoke about how safe they felt, right? Person's concern was that at 2 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, their only concern is by 2 o'clock, boy, by 2 o'clock, what forgot we had. And, for them thing was, boy, and I give you the vernacular, boy, them would have loved to say them could have parted till 4 o'clock, but by 2 o'clock, them forgot them yard. But it was okay, because they were operating they were safe. There were police officers on the road, and the level of camaraderie I saw between the police and the soldiers and the residents of Montego Bay, I was proud. I was proud to be a Jamaican. I was proud to be living in 2018, where that spirit of camaraderie between the police and the soldiers and the citizens, even within a state of emergency, were comfortable. When you look at the statistics, not just at the local level where persons are moving around, yes, there are concerns about the time business is closed, but persons understand that extreme times call for extreme measures. Visitor arrivals in terms of tourism, everybody's feeling very, very safe. One second. So to go back to the point that was made about this is a bad year for murder, it is not. It is a good year for violent crimes, because we have continued to see a reduction in violent crimes across the country, much of it attributable to the zones of special operation and the state of emergency. And I said it before, as a parliament, we should not be ashamed of any extension. We should be thankful of that. What we can do, I'm winding down.
No, please. Yes. Our purpose here is not to speak of the virtue, but to investigate what have transpired.
And I'm going back to the report now. Yes. And as we said, the report, and I said it, what we should do. And I get the 2 points in terms of the on average 4.5 days worth of detention. And I will go down a record as saying that 4 days to process someone is unacceptable, and we should get to the point. So we need to speak to the powers that be to get to the point where we are processing persons within, whether it's 48 hours or 72 hours, but certainly it should be done within 72 hours. And I must also say, coming from the police officers, their statement has been that, because it is important that the absence of proper identification oftentimes extends the time period in which to process individuals. And so we must get, as a country, move forward to a state where we have a national identification system, so every citizen can be identified. I would like to make it again because it's important to stress it.
When you're out.
If I might, I think my friend and colleague just described one Montego Bay, and our point is that there are different Montego Bays. The pool party in Salt Spring was locked down, and the young men hauled off into custody, including one man who had merely gone to pick up a patron. And that was not 2 o'clock in the morning, Council.
He has confirmed.
He has confirmed.
Mr. Bunting. Okay, one Montego Bay. I guess it have many sides.
Finish your magazine, man.
Or compartments. Member Bunting.
I want her to visit the hospital gate and to see what is there now. 4 o'clock in the
Put your head back in the magazine you're reading, man, and stop. Mr. Chairman, I want to refer to 32 and 33 because I hear repeated references to this lack of identification and tangentially making a pitch for NIDS. Now, the public defender can advise, but I'm not aware that currently, as we speak, not being in possession of an ID is a crime. In fact, In fact,
I'm sorry, point of order, Mr. Chairman.
No point
Mr.
of
Chairman,
order.
the point of order
No,
is that...
I'm not accepting a point
and I will
of
tell
order,
you,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm not
accepting a point of
unlike,
order.
I know.
I'm
It is
not
I who
accepting.
determine whether or not there's a point of order.
And unlike
What is the point of order?
when a statement was made a point of order, I will start by the point of order. At no point in time did anyone make any statement that not having an ID is a crime. No one has said that.
But I never
No
said
one
that.
has said that.
I said, I am not aware. I am not aware. But I'm referring specifically to 32 and 33 clauses in the Public Defender's report, where, and let me just read it. It has been reported to the Office of the Public Defender repeatedly that members of the security forces, both the JCF and JDF, demand photographic identification from persons in a manner to suggest that being without a photographic identification is an offense against the law and a basis for detention. Where identity is not proved, such a detainee will not be released until his identity established to the satisfaction of the security forces. That's what I'm referring to. Now, Mr. Chairman, I started before I was interrupted by the member by saying that I am not aware that there is any requirement in law today, as we speak, for persons to have identification on them at all times. And whether that might be intended for some point in the future or not, that is not the law today, nor when they were detained. And in fact, it reminds me of, my university days when we used to demonstrate against the apartheid regime in South Africa, when black South Africans could be detained just because they didn't have the pass book on them, under their pass laws, the apartheid regime's pass laws. And I don't think that is where we want to go. And in fact, I'm not aware of any Western-style parliamentary democracy that has such a law where it is an offense for you to be traveling without an identification on you.
Let me have a go first.
So, the point I wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, is to expand from the comment of the public defender about the two Montego Bays, but really it's the two Jamaicas. Because I guarantee you, if even 10%, if 400 young men from Upper St. Andrew were detained, maybe even less than that, if 100, if 20 were detained for not having an identification, you'd see how quick this state of emergency would be ended. But because it is young men from poor, underprivileged communities who don't have anyone but ourselves.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The point of order is that the member is making statements which are unfounded, inflammatory, serve a particular agenda which is not within the spirit of this particular committee. The point of order is that he's making statements that police officers, or he's seeking to give the impression that police officers are arresting persons without ID, and that is not the case. That is not the case. It is not in any report here. There is no report here that says any police officer of Jamaica or any soldier of Jamaica has arrested anyone for not having an ID. It is inflammatory, Mr. Chairman. It is highly irresponsible. And it's a gross dereliction of the duty of a member of parliament to say that. It is a gross dereliction of duty. All the report says is that. The report says it has been reported. It does not say any such report has been substantiated. Listen, my parents sent me to law school for a reason. It has been reported to the OPD repeatedly that members of security forces demand ID from persons in a manner to suggest. It does not even reach the bar of a subjective view. At no point in time has it said that persons were being stopped and persons were being arrested for not having an ID, and it is somehow tantamount to apartheid South Africa. That is irresponsible. It is inflammatory. It's a dereliction of duty. It is grossly unfair.
I'm quite confident that your law training would have advised you,
Mr. Chairman,
that it is only reason. In your comments earlier on, you proffered your opinion.
In
and
a
you
manner
never
to
considered
suggest.
it out of
in a
out
manner
of
to
order.
suggest that is
And
in a manner to suggest that
I've
is the
given
day of the so
equal
wrong.
latitude to all members.
Mr. Chairman, well, I went voluntarily to Caramac. I want to go back to my substantive request regarding the motion that I had put forward.
I'm going to be, we have to take a decision on that. I just wanted to complete the Miss Henry. As we started the last time, are we at the end of your highlights? I have a couple of questions I want to ask in sections. Turn the mic on, please.
The only thing I could really say, sir, is policing within the terms of the law. It really is fundamental.
And that brings me to a question I have for you, madam. 2 points, you touched on one before, the Suppression of Crime Act.
Yes.
Because what I was picking up from what you're saying is that the extended period, well, your exact words were each extension seemed to embolden the security forces and their conduct. And I recall one of the bases on which the Suppression of Crime Act was revoked is because of the culture that it had developed over the period without able to sustain crime reduction going forward. In other words, it didn't solve the problem, though it gave the force and by extension the culture that evolved. So that was one of the other observations I had. But at 137, and I read, an authorized person may arrest without warrant and detain pending inquiries any person whose behavior is of such a nature as to give reasonable grounds for suspecting that he has, and you set out acting, In the documentation by the police for the detainees, do they give reasons for the detention in any of the documentation? And how consistent that is if it is the case?
What is noted, Chairman, is SOE or SOPE. Those who are charged, it is noted, the charge. So you will remember last week we pointed out, for instance, that a warrant is not a charge. We felt that some other areas, there were 10 bad word cursing cases, for argument's sake, and violence producer, suspected persons, and so on. So we have a problem with the lack of notation, for instance, of an apprehending officer, an investigating officer, as part of the record keeping that we feel is necessary. We understand policing, record keeping to be a very important part of policing.
Members, you recall, Member Anna had suggested, for which I gave support to, that we invite members of the public who were detained, or their relatives, because they would be able to relate the experiences dealing with persons who were detained during the period of detention, for them to appear So in that regard, we'd have to make a public, serve public notice so that they can, and schedule them depending on the response that we get.
Mr. Chairman, I was also asking in light of some of the experiences that the police will have to go through.
No, I will come into
Okay.
that after. Let's deal with them one by one. So, members, it is before us. We're all in agreement?
I think we are certainly not in agreement. I think to ask for the public to come
We have a, okay.
we would be creating a mini state of inquiry.
No, members, wait, let us decide. Those in favor of hearing from the detainees, former detainees, and or their family members who have had experiences in the state of emergency to appear before the committee to advise us or to share up their experience. Those in favor of having that done, let me so in. Sure, I'll delay that.
I'm sorry. Do we hope to get additional information to that which has been provided by the public defender?
For myself, it will give me an opportunity to get a first-hand experience. Madam Public Defender has reported on what she has gotten out there, and I do respect it. But as you, as a member of parliament, when you meet with your constituents who are in situation, it gives you a better appreciation than even the documented reports that come to you from time to time. It is that kind of, if that is that kind of experience, I personally would like to get the benefit of.
Mr. Campbell, if you would, just 1 second. Mr. Chairman, this Parliament has a precedence of inviting the public to commissions. So it is not something, Member Whittle, that is unfamiliar to us. But I sense that there is a hesitation on your part. Is it because of the nature of the public?
No, because I'm satisfied with the report of the person that we charge with the responsibility. As we would have delegated that responsibility to the public.
I take the point, that you might be satisfied, but I don't think you want to deny us who are not satisfied of getting a better appreciation from having that. You don't want to deny us of that.
Chairman, may I just make the point? Is it going to take us any further? We have the recommendations, and the public defender has said to us, police within the terms of the law. Is it when we're hoping to get some information, and I don't believe it's going to take us any further. Because
I think if
a detainee comes here and says I was roughed up, I wasn't fed properly, I was held for 92 days. Is it going to take us any further than the recommendations as made by the public defender? Because I don't see that is contemplated at all.
Miss Harrison's team have reported on what they have reported on. When we get the persons who have gone through the experience, they might be able to share with us things that they never covered in the report.
And I understand that, but it's having found that 100 or 200 persons were detained for 120 days. Yes, we know that the police must police within the terms of the law. They weren't fed properly. They weren't given the $300 which the law prescribes. Yes, they ought to be given the $300.
No, I'm just making reference to some of the points.
Oh, you're being very kind. I didn't interrupt you, I'm just
to what was being said.
You're very kind. All I'm saying, I want to know if that is what we hope to get. If we're going to get to the point where, having heard the information, because we really want to save time, we have lots of very important things to do, and I don't believe that's my view, and that we're not going. It's not going to take us any further than we are presently.
Yes. Member Bunting. And then Member Fagan.
Mr. Chairman, Member Campbell said that this committee has lots of important things to do. I think defending the rights of our citizens is the most important thing that we are tasked with as parliamentarians. And this particular committee, with responsibility for security, matters of national security, has this specific task. Now, we are already curtailing the liberty of these 4,000 and growing number of in the main young men. And are we now saying that a vote in this committee to not allow them to come and give a testimony to their experiences in detention, then we are further curtailing their right to be heard in the parliament of this land? I mean, what is it? What are we about?
Well, I think it would be an indictment against us.
It would be an indictment. We are supposed to be representing these same people's interests. We're not here representing the state. We are a check and balance on the executive. We're not here to be part of the executive. This is why ministers should not even sit on these committees. Because ministers will come here with divided allegiance. Are they here as a member? Which cap are they wearing? As a member of the executive or a member of the legislature who is tasked with being a check on the powers of the executive?
Indeed.
Lest anyone lest it be misunderstood. All I'm saying is that I want to preserve the rights of citizens. And if anything, if what the public defender is saying to us to do is that we must do whatever we need to do to preserve those rights. That's what I want.
Noted.
But
Sorry.
If we bring those people, are we going to get additional benefits from them?
I believe so, yes. I personally believe so.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. But I don't want my friends to go away with believing that I'm here trying to curtail.
I think he's clear.
I want compliance with the law.
Yes.
And I want those recommendations.
Okay, members, we have to now decide. We have ventilated the matter enough. I'm putting it for the committee to decide. Those in favor of proceeding with having the members, let me show your hand. Those who are against? 1. Those, okay. It is passed. No. 3 plus 2, 1.
No.
Those who abstain?
I'm saying to you that you don't have a vote. You only have a casting vote.
I asked for the hands, but I saw one hand went up.
No, I saw your hand, and I'm trying to explain to you
that
you
sorry.
only have a casting vote. You don't have a vote. If there's a tie, then you can have a casting vote. Yes.
Sorry. Those who are against, raise your hands. 4. So 4-3 vote against hearing the members of the family of those who were affected are their family members. The other proposal by member, the member, and I've also made the request that in light of the submissions that we have gotten from the public defender in regards to the conduct of the police, the security forces, that it would only be fair to have them come back and respond to those claims. Those in favor? Those against? Okay. So we the records we will now schedule our meeting to hear when is the next meeting date?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted a question.
Member Fagan.
The question had to do with I think that the matter of how the detainees are held and what is happening to them presently. paragraph 69, and I should have started with 18 and then 69. What I wanted to find out, Mr. Chairman, is that Mr. Chairman, I don't think that the state of emergency, as it is now, will continue into January. And I really empathize with the detainees because it could be any one of us. I mean, I can understand somebody being locked away, coming from a football match, or just went down the road to check a friend, or a pool party, Mr. Chairman. What I want to find out, if there's any, having heard this report since the last time to today, can anything change? Can this committee, is there any power of this committee to order or to allow for our persons here to take any kind of action or to move? Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, somebody locked away, $300 available to feed the person? You don't know when you'll get that meal. It is done in unhealthy condition. I mean, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, is there a way that over this period going into January, when we shall look at the state of emergency again, for some kind of matter to be dealt with to alleviate this kind of real problem, Mr. Chairman? I mean, these guys are taking this thing for a joke. Yeah. I mean, it could be a son, it could be a brother. Don't care. You know, it's an uptown man will shoot a man somewhere and them can't, and nobody don't lock them up. It is a serious matter. What is being said here is that there, by the minister's own admission, he went somewhere, he was able to party, and he wanted to stay all night till 4 o'clock night.
I said no such thing. I said no such thing, Mr. Chairman. I said no such thing. I spoke of the experiences that persons in Montego Bay spoke of. I said no such thing about what about the work. Why is he speaking?
On Rose Heights and Canterbury. Them party until morning. You don't live there. I live there.
You don't go because
I'm not a drinker, I'm not a smoker. I'm not going to go.
So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, all I want to find out if there's anything that can be done to alleviate the suffering of these persons who are detained. Many of them are detained and cannot get any bail, cannot be no reason at all, other than they don't have an ID.
Member Fagan, I think you're echoing the concern of the public defender.
Right.
And you ask the question what power the committee has. Well, the committee don't have any power, but by virtue of what has come to light, I hope that good sense will prevail. I hope that conscience, I hope that a sense of reasonableness, I believe a sense of compassion for all Jamaicans, in such as that 3,600 persons. Any of them could be any of my two sons who are thrown into detention cell for 4 days. Yes, I have two sons. I have two sons. I have two sons.
And Mr. Chairman, that's why.
And my message is that the same way I care about my sons, I care about every other young man and woman throughout Jamaica. And all of us have that responsibility to all, not just for some. And we must ensure that we have a security arrangement that preserves the rights and the freedom of all Jamaicans and not just some. And the security of some cannot be at the expense of the liberty of others who are innocent.
And Mr. Chairman, you know, the very first thing that the administration, as a parliament and as a government, when we all agreed to the state of emergency, we ensured that the police officers, that they receive training, because there is no Jamaican who wants any other Jamaican for their liberty to be detained. So our police officers receive sensitized training. One second, Mr. Chairman. And so, Mr. Chairman, we have read the recommendations of the public defender, Mr. Chairman. As a committee, we have all agreed that the police officers and soldiers, that they will come back and that they will answer the concerns raised by the public defender, Mr. Chairman. I have also expressly indicated that processing time should be reduced.
You said that earlier on.
So, Mr. Chairman, we care about ordinary Jamaicans. We care about all Jamaicans, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Terrelong, if you'll appreciate some help, how the committee operates. We have gotten a presentation. We will have a draft report at a later stage developed. When we go through the draft report, we can propose any amendment to the report before it is tabled. So we all will have an opportunity to ensure that the report fully reflects the representations and our own perspectives in the form of a set of recommendations that we will make.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Before we get them, Mr. Chairman, whilst we have made a recommendation for persons to come here, Mr. Chairman, what I would say, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of all Jamaicans, I believe as a committee, we could, in the interim, ask the head of the police and the JDF if they could ensure that their members abide by the spirit of Regulation 30. That the detention of persons should only be done in circumstances where there is reasonable suspicion, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm about to get from the committee agreement on the next date for our meeting with the head of the security forces, as we had.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm saying in the interim that the appeal is made for persons to only be detained in circumstances where there's reasonable suspicion, in keeping with the spirit of Section 30. As a committee, we're making that appeal in the interim.
Miss Anna.
I would commit Member Terrelong, if he has not studied the lyrics of Protege's Blood Money, to probably go and look at it. Because I think sometimes, if not most times, a number of our reggae artists and other persons are the vanguards upon which persons like those who are detained seek redress, and they're a mouthpiece for some of the things that are happening in society. To me, the fact that this committee voted to hear from the state and not from the people sends a very deep signal about how some of us choose to represent people and this parliament. And we cannot move forward as a country if we continue to treat people's rights this way. If you talk to a number of young men who feel aggrieved, you don't even have to go so far. Talk to Member Grange and Member Charles, who in this house still speaks about being detained under the state of emergency, and they speak about it. And for the fact, Mr. Chairman, and I feel very, very passionate about it, because I have spoken to young men who have been detained unnecessarily, and it is painful, and it addresses, and it turns into other circumstances. It has been a dark day, certainly for me, and the way we have treated with it, to not even entertain the fact that families could have come to their own parliament in a democracy to talk to us is really, really sad.
I feel and I share your pain, Member Hannah, not just as a parliamentarian, but as a parent myself. And I would personally, given my own personal opinion, I would have hoped that my colleagues would reconsider their position.
Chairman, may I just inquire as to whether the procedures which are available to the detainees has been exhausted? Because I know there's a certain procedure which they have to follow. in Montego Bay, a body is set up there to hear the evidence from them and for certain determinations to be made. I haven't heard
Miss Harrison Henry, want to respond to?
Sorry, Chair, I was a little bit distracted, so I didn't hear the members' question.
The microphone.
Powers Review Tribunal, yes.
And Wilkinson Queen's Counsel, Reverend Dr. David Henry, and there's one other person, and they can appear with counsel before.
Only in certain circumstances, and that the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal spent quite a number of hours determining the extent of their jurisdiction, and they came to the view that they had jurisdiction under Regulation 33. Only, therefore, in instances where detention orders have been signed by the minister. The vast majority of detainees are picked up arbitrarily, and we say under Regulation 30. Those persons do not, as a matter of right, have any entitlement to go before the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal. They have to be treated with, whether through the regime established under Regulation 30 itself, which can take you up to 3 months or the end of the state of emergency, or you have to go before the parish court judge. We hold the view that habeas corpus is not ousted at any time, right? So the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal, therefore, has a limited jurisdiction, as they have so interpreted for themselves, and relating only to detention orders under Regulation 33.
Let me just ask you, do you believe that your findings would be improved in any way, can be improved in any way?
My findings can be improved were I to get the statistical data for St. Catherine North and Kingston Western, and that way my findings, and I would be put in a position to give Parliament a more comprehensive analysis of what we have.
Well, let's truncate it. Let's just deal, because you have all you can possibly have in relation to Montego Bay. There's nothing else that you can. You've interviewed the detainees, you have spoken with related parties, and you have had the benefit of first-hand information, which you have reduced into that document which we have before us.
He have not answered the question, do you have all that you can have? As an investigator in this matter, I don't close any door. There is more information to be had from persons who have been affected, and this is something that we have spoken about all the time. There are more detainees. I haven't interviewed all of them. And the position of this office is that we close no door when it comes to young people.
Yes, I appreciate all of that you may not. But in carrying out such investigation, we don't call all the witnesses. You would have had a sample of persons who are determined, who are detained in such circumstances. And having interviewed them, you have reduced your recommendations into writing. And all I'm saying, is there anything that this Parliament can do to facilitate you in completing your investigation by carrying out further inquiries or whatever it is?
I certainly would like the assistance of a behavioral scientist on my team. I would like the assistance of a psychiatrist on my team, as I do believe, and I've expressed this opinion before, that we have created a lot of problems for ourselves that will manifest itself. And this is no new opinion I've expressed. But of course I can't ground that because I do not have those skills. So if Parliament wanted to help, we would be embracive of a team who can assess the aftermath and impact of detention on a cohort of young men, primarily from 19 to 25.
Members, we have to decide the next date. The next available date for us is the 19th of December. All the other meeting days are taken. 19th of December, which is a Wednesday. We could do it at 10 in the morning. But no, and safely in the afternoon, PAC.
Mr. Chairman, board, I think it would be very important for us to come and hear from former detainees or current detainees' families. But since we are not going to do that, then I'm not sure what the urgency.
I think you want to say, regrettably, we are not going to do it.
Regrettably, we're not going to do that. Then I am not sure it is
okay, so you're
that
not
urgent
outside
for us
of
to
that.
come
The
out
19th is not recommended. Remember, Anna?
Mr. Chairman, in listening to the public defender and her request, and I think it's an urgent request because it's some of the data that is also available through Elizabeth Ward. There is also Dr. Shetty, who is a youth child psychologist. There is Maureen Sams-Vaughan. And there are others who work in the remand center systems and in the correction systems, looking at some of this toxicity. But there is also doctors abroad and locally who look at the impact of post-traumatic stress on the primary healthcare system going forward. And I'd be prepared to share some of those names because she's absolutely correct. This problem is not only going to manifest itself, as Elizabeth Ward says, as an epidemic, because violence and crime becomes an epidemic and it has spin-offs. But the data suggests internationally that if you do not fix post-traumatic stress, especially in children and youth, it manifests itself in diabetes and a whole host of other things. You need to look up the data before you look at me. So I would be interested to have the Parliament help the public defender as well to find some of those technicians who can anchor this data, because apart from her making the recommendations, if you're really going to fix crime, it's also a health issue. These young men that she speaks about will need counseling and a number of other things depending on what it is. That's why it was important to bring them here. No, I was a minister of youth and children.
We have to take it beyond here. It's not a matter. One of the responsibilities of the committee is security, and as all the research has indicated, sustainable crime reduction requires intervention in numerous social areas of national life: education, community, health. And if we are really serious, we have to interrogate all those areas. Members, given the feedback I'm getting that the 19th will not be on, we are going to go into January. What kind of dates are you looking at for January? And about the first week? Okay. All right, in short, the secretary is not able to adequately advise on the days now. What I'm proposing to do, when she would have gotten information from the Sorry, I'm getting some updated information here. No, must be the 8th first. New Year's Day. 8th is a Tuesday. In the morning. Tuesday morning, the 8th of January. 10 o'clock. That's the available time now. We're all in agreement on that, no? In the morning. The 8th. No, this is independent of the sitting. So I take it from your silence, from your loud silence, that the 8th is fine. So we will convene on the 8th at 10, and we will invite the commissioner. I want to believe, members, I'm inviting your feedback, that on that day, we also could have the public defender in attendance, not necessarily to be taken. I don't know what your feelings are. To Europe? Are we accepting that? Yes, yes. Yes. So, Madam Public Defender, we want to invite you back on that day too.
Chairman, whilst I have no difficulty with the date, they will come with data for St. Catherine North and Kingston Western.
Sure.
We do not yet have that data, and therefore we would want to have the fullness of the data before we attend on that day. So I don't know, Chair, how it is that this committee can assist us in getting that data in ample time for analysis.
I want to suggest, and very good point, Madam Public Defender. What if we put a cutoff date, ask the police to give us a cutoff up to the 15th of December? Right? So within a week after that, after the 15th of December, up to the 15th of December. How long before you come here would you like to have the data?
I would have to consult with my statistician and his team. So
let me suggest this to make it safer. Why don't we do the cutoff at the end of November?
That will be fine.
And you get it within a week or so.
But Chairman, remember, we don't have the data at all, you know.
No.
For St. Catherine North.
No, that is the data I'm going to be seeking from the JCF and the JDF for you. Up to the end of November.
Fine.
So within a week, if it's up until the end, give them a week to give us up until the end of November.
Yes.
And then you'll have a week from there before we meet here on the 8th.
That
so
will
we'll
be fine.
write to the Commissioner and the JDF to provide the data. I'm going to ask to provide a description of the data in the form that you have gotten it before, which allow for the analysis that you did, right? And you'll just provide the specific description of it, that which you got, which you are seeking to get for the period up to then for St. Catherine and Kingston. So we will meet on the 8th. Members, I'm going to ask that when we meet on we'll read the report of the FLA and MOCA, and any correction, anything you have, you by email forward it.
When you say the report, you mean the minutes?
No, the draft report.
Or the
draft report and FLA and MOCA. There's a draft report that has been circulated.
Today?
No. It was tabled last week. Okay. So what I'm seeking to do, members, is that soon after we complete the reports, we have them tabled, that we can get them debated in short order. So if we can make sure, we're going to have the whole break period, but if within another week or two you could provide your comments, so we could vote on the report when we meet on the 8th and have it ready for tabling thereafter. And we will also dispose of the minutes at that meeting. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm going to deal with them before we take the submissions so that they don't get deferred. Members, no other business. We know.
Mr. Chairman, it is usual that you say
no,
thanks to the.
No, I'm going to do that. I want to make sure you don't have any other business that the committee is to take on. Madam Public Defender, we have imposed on you twice already, and we're going for a third time. But being the defender you are, I don't think you mind responding to our request. Thanks to you and your team for once again coming to us. Members, meeting now adjourned until the 8th at 10 a.m. 8th of January 2019. And as I take the adjournment, we will not be meeting again for the rest of the year. I wish for all members of the committee and our guests a peaceful, safe, happy, and healthy and non-detained holiday until we get here on the 8th of January. Meeting now adjourned.
The single best thing you can do to protect yourself when online shopping is to be careful about who you're giving your payment details to. If you're not entirely sure whether the retailer you're visiting is reliable, do some research to verify its authenticity and its security. Educate yourself.
Respect authority and keep your dreams alive. School has to study, not to fight. Hey, we need each other. CF School are what we are dealing with. Yay, safety is a human right. Don't destroy your own destiny. Building safer schools in safer communities. Play it safe, grab a book, link a friend, talk out loud. A message brought to you by the Safe Schools Task Force. CF School are what we are dealing with.